You know what's interesting about avoidant attachment? Avoidants don't lack feelings. They are full of emotions. It's that they don't know how to sit with what they feel, especially when intimacy threatens their sense of control. When an avoidant person ends a relationship with an anxious partner, they often appear stone cold, detached, rational. It feels like they're happy to see it all end. But to the anxious partner, that rejection cuts deep because it seems so complete. But here's the part that no one talks about. That moment of relief is temporary. It's a defense mechanism, not emotional clarity. Avoidants are wired to create space when they feel emotionally overwhelmed. That's their survival instinct. When intimacy gets too close, their nervous system starts to ring internal alarm bells, and distancing becomes the only way they know how to self-soothe. So they push away the very person offering them closeness. Often the anxious partner desperately tries to bridge the gap. The avoidant reaches out, seeks reassurance, clings. The avoidant retreats, gets irritated, and shuts down. What's misunderstood is what happens after the breakup. When the anxious partner finally goes no contact, stops reaching out, stops chasing, stops offering affection and attention, the avoidant isn't flooded with peace. Over time, they're flooded with something far more uncomfortable: space. And in that space, the emotions they were trying to escape starts to catch up with them. Regret creeps in. They'll never admit it or tell it to anyone, but a subtle growing discomfort. That's when the avoidant begins to miss the anxious partner they once dismissed. Their avoidant armor starts to crack. When the anxious partner was still in the picture, always reaching out, always available, the avoidant had control. They could count on the anxious person's presence, even while they were pretending not to care. But once the anxious partner detaches for real, the avoidant is left with the very thing they thought they wanted: freedom. And it feels empty. Most avoidants don't process loss in real time. Their emotional processing is delayed. They try to be cold and practical to avoid feeling. But emotions don't disappear. They stay suppressed beneath the surface until the environment is quiet enough for them to rise. That silence, that no contact period, becomes fertile ground for realization. A realization that comes with confusion. Why am I suddenly nostalgic? Why am I scrolling through old texts? Did I make a mistake? But by then, the anxious partner may be healing, finding their worth, learning self-love. That shift, that loss of control over the anxious person's attention, creates a void. The validation the avoidant once took for granted is gone. And they miss it, not just for the comfort it provided, but for what it meant. That they mattered to someone, even when they tried to act like they didn't need anyone. This is the emotional trap of the avoidant mindset. They throw away the connection to protect themselves. But in the end, they realize what they threw away wasn't a threat. It was someone who saw them, someone who stayed, someone who tried. If you're someone who's struggling in your relationship right now and you're with an anxious or an avoidant attachment style, then just click on the link in the caption in this video and you'll be one of 5 people who can apply to book a call with me, and I'll offer you some solutions on how we can help with that. Now let's talk about emotional investment, real emotional investment. Anxiously attached individuals bring emotional intensity into relationships. Not for drama, but intensity. That comes from caring deeply, being all in, and constantly monitoring the emotional temperature of the connection. They notice small changes, remember things you said weeks ago, check in repeatedly to make sure you're okay. That's not neediness, it's attunement. It's alertness born from fear of abandonment, but it's also the fear that creates emotional safety when understood and reciprocated. When an avoidant enters a relationship with someone anxious, there's often an initial spark. The avoidant is drawn to the warmth, the care, the availability. The anxious partner is emotionally present in a way that feels nourishing, something the avoidant didn't realize they were craving. But because avoidants equate closeness with risk, they pull back the moment things feel too good. Not because their love is fake, but because it is real, and real connection triggers old wounds. So what happens after the breakup? Especially if the anxious partner goes silent. The avoidant begins to remember what they lost, not just the person, but the experience of being cared for in such a devoted way. They recall the small ways the anxious partner showed up. Morning texts, thoughtful check-ins, small actions of care shown quietly without being asked. They miss it, not because they suddenly evolved, but because that kind of emotional investment is rare. You don't just forget someone who loved you like that, even if you're an avoidant. When you receive love offered freely, not for control, but out of genuine care, you're invited into an intimacy that exposes your deepest defenses. The anxious partner often mirrors to the avoidant everything they've been unconsciously running from: vulnerability, accountability, and emotional transparency. While that mirror triggers the avoidant, it's also healing if they're ready to face it. Most avoidants aren't ready, so they reject it. But rejection doesn't erase memory or the body's experience of being seen, held, and understood. That's what they miss, not just the person, but the emotional world that person created around them. A world where they were allowed to be human, where someone stayed even when they pulled away, where love was persistent, not conditional. If you're the anxious one who feels your love was wasted, it wasn't. You showed someone a version of connection they weren't ready to hold. But that doesn't make you less valuable or less worthy. Because emotional investment doesn't become less meaningful just because someone couldn't receive it. It becomes part of their story, whether they admit it or not, and sometimes what they miss most isn't you, it's how they felt in your presence. People don't always miss you because they loved you well. Sometimes they miss you because you loved them well, and they didn't know how to hold it in their hands. What we run from eventually becomes what we long for, and nothing haunts the avoidant more than the peace they couldn't appreciate when it was still knocking on their door. If you're someone who knows you've been through a relationship with an anxious or an avoidant attachment style, you know you're carrying trauma from that, then it's time to do something about it. There's a booking call in the link of this caption, and you just click on it, and you can be one of the 5 people I can accept within the next week to speak to show you some solutions you can do to heal that. It could be a 3-day event, it could be some coaching solutions, but give yourself this opportunity to see what you can do to heal, because you can't be with someone who's been any more healed than you have become. The more healed you become, the better you can attract a greater healed version of another person into your life and heal your relationship if you're in one right now. I'll see you soon.